The Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide, and right now, it's the most dangerous piece of water on planet Earth. Every single day, 20% of the world's oil flows through that narrow channel between Iran and Oman. But as of this week, Iran's paramilitary forces are stopping ships, blocking passage, turning back container vessels. And yesterday, a Thai cargo ship ran aground in the strait after being fired on. 3 crew members are missing. Gas prices are spiking, and the United States just announced it's sending 3,000 combat troops to the region, not to negotiate, not to observe, to force that strait back open. And if you think that sounds like the beginning of a war, you're paying attention. Look, let's get the facts straight first. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched coordinated airstrikes on Iran. Not just military bases, not just missile sites, nuclear facilities. We're talking about a heavy water plant and a yellow cake production facility. Now, if you don't know what yellow cake is, it's the first step in uranium processing, what you need to build a nuclear weapon. And the US and Israel just bombed it. Tehran's response? Counterattacks, not just against Israel, against the entire region. Kuwait's most important port hit by drones overnight. Bahrain, Qatar, missile alerts going off. The war isn't contained anymore, it's spreading. This isn't some random escalation, this is calculated. Iran's government knows exactly what they're doing. They're not just firing back at Israel, they're attacking the economic jugular of the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz, that 21-mile choke point I mentioned, it's not just important, it's irreplaceable. 1/5 of the world's oil supply flows through there every single day. Crude oil from Saudi Arabia, liquefied natural gas from Qatar, all of it has to pass through that strait to reach Europe, Asia, the United States. And Iran's paramilitary Basij militia, they're denying passage to ships. 3 container vessels were turned away just this week. The justification? They claim President Trump said the strait is open to shipping, so they're proving him wrong. Get this, Trump extended his ultimatum again on Thursday. He pushed back his threatened attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure by 10 days to April 6, 2026. He called the passage of 10 oil tankers a gift from Tehran, a sign of goodwill. But what he's not saying, Iran isn't backing down. They're still blocking ships. They're still launching drone attacks. And yesterday, a Thai freighter called the Mayuri Nari ran aground near the island of Kesh. 3 crew members are missing. This is the second time that ship's been hit in the same region. It was attacked on March 11th, and now it's run aground after more fire. Emergency services from Iran and Oman reached the vessel, but the crew's fate still unknown.
Where this gets serious. The Pentagon just greenlit the deployment of 3,000 troops from the 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East. And if you don't know what that means, let me break it down. The 82nd Airborne, they're not your standard infantry. They're the only division in the U.S. Army that maintains an immediate response force, a unit that can deploy anywhere in the world within 18 hours. These are elite paratroopers, the same division that jumped into Normandy on D-Day, the same unit that led the invasion of Panama in 1989, that seized the Baghdad airport in 2003. They don't get sent somewhere to observe, they get sent to fight. And right now, the Pentagon's official line is no decisions have been made for troops to enter Iran. You believe that? Because I don't. Look at the math. The US already has 50,000 troops in the region, 50,000, and now they're adding 3,000 more from the one division that specializes in forced entry behind enemy lines? That's not defensive positioning, that's preparation. 2 defense officials, speaking anonymously because they're not authorized to discuss internal planning, they confirmed the deployment. But they won't say what the mission is. They won't say if boots are going on Iranian soil. They won't say anything except it's being considered. When the Pentagon says they're considering something, it means they've already decided. They're just waiting for the political cover to announce it. And get this, U.S. Central Command announced on Tuesday that American aircraft and missile attacks have destroyed more than 9,000 military targets inside Iran since February 28th. 9,000! Missile launchers, naval vessels, defense production facilities, and they've killed dozens of Iranian regime leadership. But it's not enough. Iran's still firing ballistic missiles at Israel. They're still blocking the strait. And now, Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, is threatening to escalate. Katz's office put out a statement. Israel's army will escalate its attacks and target more areas inside Iran. The focus? Iranian weapons facilities. The reason? Ongoing rocket fire into Israeli civilian areas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Katz, they warned Tehran to stop the attacks. But the warnings didn't work. And on the same day Katz made that announcement, more rockets came in from Iran. Tel Aviv, sirens going off again. No casualties reported, but that's not the point. The point is, Iran's not stopping. Hold on. Before I show you what the Pentagon's next move is, I need to know you're on the inside with us. Independent intelligence like this, it doesn't stay free forever. The mainstream media's gonna give you the sanitized version, the press briefings, the talking points. But this is the real briefing, the one they don't want you to hear. Hit that subscribe button right now. Keep this briefing room open, because what I'm about to tell you next, it's gonna change how you see this entire war. Bro, let's get back to the numbers.
All right, so why does the Strait of Hormuz matter this much? Let me break it down. The strait sits between Iran to the north and Oman to the south. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and then out to the Arabian Sea. Every oil tanker coming out of the Persian Gulf, from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, the UAE, Qatar, they all have to pass through this 21-mile wide channel. 21 miles, that's it. And at its narrowest point, the shipping lanes are only 2 miles wide. 2 miles. You could shut down 1/5 of the world's oil supply with a handful of missile batteries and some naval mines. Iran knows this. They've known it for decades, and they've built their entire defensive strategy around it. What they've got: anti-ship cruise missiles positioned along the coast, fast attack boats that can swarm larger vessels, submarines, naval mines, and drones. Lots of drones. The U.S. Navy's been wargaming this scenario since the 1980s, and every single time, the conclusion is the same. If Iran decides to close the strait, it's going to take a massive military operation to reopen it. We're talking airstrikes on coastal missile sites, minesweepers clearing the channel, and potentially ground troops securing key positions on the Iranian side. Which brings us back to the 82nd Airborne. So, what is the 82nd Airborne? Why does this deployment matter? The 82nd Airborne Division, based out of Fort Liberty in North Carolina, they're a rapid deployment force, paratroopers, trained to jump out of planes behind enemy lines, seize airfields, secure strategic positions. They've got about 18,000 soldiers total, but the immediate response force, the guys who can deploy in 18 hours, that's about a brigade, roughly 3,000 to 4,000 troops. Sound familiar? That's exactly the number the Pentagon just announced. These aren't peacekeepers. They're not there to hand out food and water. They're assault troops. Their job is to kick down the door and hold it open while heavier forces move in. And if the U.S. decides to force the Strait of Hormuz back open by taking Iranian coastal positions, the 82nd Airborne is exactly who you'd send first. Now, let's talk about those nuclear facilities that got hit. The reports say a heavy water plant and a yellowcake production facility were targeted. So what does that mean? Yellowcake. It's uranium ore that's been milled and concentrated. It's called yellowcake because of its color, kind of a yellowish powder. It's the raw material you need to eventually enrich uranium for either nuclear power or nuclear weapons. A heavy water plant, that's a facility that produces deuterium oxide, which is used as a neutron moderator in certain types of nuclear reactors. It's also critical for producing plutonium, another path to a nuclear weapon. So when the US and Israel hit those facilities, they weren't just going after Iran's missile program, they were going after the nuclear program itself. And the problem, when you bomb a nuclear facility, you risk contamination. You risk releasing radioactive material into the environment. The airstrikes on the city of Qom, a religious center and a strategic industrial hub, they killed at least 15 people, 10 more injured. Rescue workers are still pulling bodies out of the rubble. Qom's not just any city, it's one of the most important Shiite pilgrimage sites in the world, and it's got strategic nuclear and industrial facilities nearby. Hitting that city, that's not just a military strike, that's a political message. So what does this mean for you, the American taxpayer, the American voter, the American family with a son or daughter in the military? Let's start with your wallet. Gas prices, they're already spiking. The national average is climbing towards $6 a gallon in some states. And if Iran fully closes the Strait of Hormuz, analysts are predicting $7, maybe $8 a gallon. You think inflation was bad in 2022? Wait until oil hits $150 a barrel, because 20% of global supply just got cut off. Heating costs up. Airfare up. Shipping costs for everything from Amazon packages to grocery store deliveries, all of it goes up. And who pays for that? You do. Now, let's talk about the human cost. 50,000 U.S. troops already in the region, another 3,000 on the way. And what the Pentagon's not telling you, a Reuters Ipsos poll released this week showed that 61% of Americans disapprove of the strikes on Iran. 61%. That number was 59% last week. Support is dropping. Only 35% of Americans approve of this war, down from 37% 7 days ago. The public's turning against this, and if the 82nd Airborne goes into Iran, if American soldiers start coming home in flag-draped coffins, that number's gonna drop even further. And the political reality. We're heading into the 2026 midterms. Congress is up for grabs. And if gas is at $7 a gallon, if American troops are dying in Iran, if the public's screaming to bring them home, that's going to be an electoral bloodbath for whoever's in power. Trump knows this. That's why he's talking about productive talks with Iran. That's why he pushed back his deadline to April 6th. He's trying to find an off-ramp before this thing spirals completely out of control.
But the problem, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in Israel's first airstrikes. The head of state, dead. You think Iran's going to negotiate after that? Tehran's not looking for peace, they're looking for revenge. And every rocket they fire into Israel, every ship they block in the Strait, every drone they send into Kuwait or Bahrain, that's them saying, we're not backing down. What the mainstream media's not telling you. This war, it's not really about Iran's nuclear program. It's not even about Israel's security. It's about oil, and it's about power. Look at the map. Iran sits on the Persian Gulf. They've got the Strait on one side, and they've got massive oil and gas reserves on the other. They're the 7th largest oil producer in the world, and they've got the 2nd largest natural gas reserves on the planet. If the US and Israel can take out Iran's government, install a friendly regime, suddenly you've got access to all that energy. You've got a compliant state sitting right in the middle of the Middle East. You've got a new regional order.
But the risk, if this goes wrong, if Iran closes the strait and keeps it closed for weeks, the global economy crashes. We're talking about a supply shock that makes the 1970s oil crisis look like a minor inconvenience. Europe's economy, crushed. Asia's growth, stalled. And the United States, we'd be looking at a recession, maybe worse. And the military risk. Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov just went on French television and said, quote, "We have supplied Iran with certain types of military goods." Certain types? What does that mean? U.S. intelligence believes Russia's been feeding Iran targeting data on American military bases in the region. Lavrov denies it, says the coordinates are openly accessible and don't need to be transmitted by intelligence services. But nobody believes him. Because what we know, Iran's been hitting targets with precision. Kuwaiti ports, U.S.-linked shipping, and their ballistic missiles are getting through Israeli defenses more often than they should. Somebody's helping them, and the smart money says it's Moscow. Russia wants the U.S. bogged down in the Middle East. They want American resources, American attention, American money flowing into Iran instead of Ukraine. It's strategic distraction.
And it's working. The Pentagon's already stretched thin. 50,000 troops in the Middle East, ongoing commitments in Europe, the Pacific, and now they're sending the 82nd Airborne, one of the most elite units in the U.S. military, to potentially fight a ground war in Iran. You know what that sounds like? Overextension. This is how empires collapse, not from one big defeat, but from fighting too many wars, in too many places, all at the same time. What you need to watch in the next 10 days. April 6th. That's Trump's new deadline. He says if Iran doesn't reopen the strait, if they don't stop the rocket attacks, he's going to hit their energy infrastructure. Power plants, oil refineries, natural gas facilities. He's threatening to take out the entire Iranian energy grid. If that happens, and I mean when that happens, Iran's going to respond, and their response isn't going to be another drone strike on Kuwait. It's going to be total closure of the Strait of Hormuz, naval mines in the shipping lanes, anti-ship missiles hitting every tanker that tries to pass, and potentially attacks on Saudi oil facilities, on Emirati ports, on U.S. bases across the region. That's not speculation. That's doctrine. Iran's made it clear, if they can't export oil, nobody can. And when that happens, when global oil prices hit $200 a barrel, when gas stations in the U.S. are running dry, when the economy's in free fall, the Pentagon's going to have one option left. Send in the 82nd Airborne, seize the Iranian coastal positions, force the strait back open, and that's when American soldiers start dying on Iranian soil. So I got a question for you, and I want you to answer this in the comments below. Do you think Trump's ceasefire talk is real, or is this just political theater before the midterms? And if your son or daughter was in the 82nd Airborne, would you support sending them into Iran? Drop your answer below, because in 10 days, we're going to find out if this war ends or if it's just beginning. This is Essence Global, and you just got the briefing they don't want you to hear.